Guys. Could be afternoon, I don't know. I'm not sure how many of you sleep in the mornings, but either way, it's good to see you. I thought we would start our reading lesson by continuing on with our story about Pocahontas. Okay, so if you remember, I'm going to call them Indians because that's what they were called back then. The Indians were there, and the Pilgrims came over, and they had a captain, John Smith. And the Indians captured him because they wanted to show the other pilgrims that there was a lot of them and that this was their land, and they were working really hard to try to keep their land. So about that time, more pilgrims are coming, okay? In the meantime, Pocahontas really liked the captain, and she wanted everyone to be friends, okay? So on the very end of that, what we heard, one day another ship arrived, bringing more English settlers. The new settlers took more land. This made Powhatan angry. Pocahontas and Captain Smith tried to keep the peace, but the Indians and the settlers did not like each other. Okay, so here they are unloading their ship. They're all getting off, and they're having a meeting trying to work it out with each other. And one thing that you have to keep in mind, when the English settlers arrived, they spoke a language. Well, the Indians that already lived here didn't speak the same language. So it was probably really hard to try to talk to each other about it, okay? They weren't understanding each other. Now, the captain and Pocahontas tried to teach each other a few words, but probably not enough to have the whole language to really sit down and explain it. So that's probably adding to a lot of the trouble. So, all right, here we go. Winter came again. Captain Smith wanted to trade English goods for food. So remember, the settlers came and they're not really familiar with his land. To them, it's just open land. They didn't know how to grow their own food. They didn't know how to make tortillas with corn. They didn't know how to plant vegetables, and the Indians were trying to teach them. But when winter comes, not a lot grows in the winter. Okay, it's cold. You guys know that. When the snow comes, nothing really lives. The grass kind of dies, and all your mom's pretty flowers die, and that's kind of how it was back then. All the crops die. So the settlers are hungry, so they wanted to trade some of the things that they brought with them from their world and trade with the Indians. Okay? He camped near Powhatan's village. Pocahontas heard her father plan to attack his camp. So the captain came over with some people and built a little camp nearby, hoping that maybe they could kind of hang out and trade some stuff. And in the middle of the night, Pocahontas overheard the captain make a plan to attack him. Pocahontas waited until everyone was asleep, and then she walked through the wind and the snow to warn her friend. "You have saved me again, Pocahontas," said Captain Smith. So she's walking out in the winter time. She's trying to get over to the captain to let him know that, hey, they're planning to come and attack you. So many seasons passed. Pocahontas grew into a young woman, and she moved to a new village. She heard that her friend John Smith had died. The Indians and settlers continued to fight. One day an English ship docked near the village. Pocahontas went on board to visit. The ship's captain, Captain Argall, would not let her leave. She was kidnapped. So Captain Smith was friendly. They got along. Pocahontas liked him, he liked her. So she just kind of assumed that all the captains would be that way and that all of the pilgrims that came over would be friendly. So she jumps on this ship to try to talk to them and work it out. And then she found out they weren't really friendly and they kidnapped her. Captain Argall took Pocahontas to a new town near Jamestown. Pocahontas learned to act like a settler. She wore heavy cloth dresses and a cap on her head. She went to church, and she had new friends. They baptized her and gave her an English name. They named her Rebecca. Okay, so here's the first time ever she's wearing these big heavy dresses. This is what the pilgrims wore, and she's never worn anything like that. So to her, it was kind of weird. So they put that on her. They also made her wear a bonnet or a cap, and she went to church with them. So they changed who she was completely. They even changed her name. How do you guys feel about that? Do you think they should have done that? Do you think that Pocahontas should be changed into a pilgrim, or do you think she should be allowed to stay as she was and still be friends with them? After all the settlers liked Pocahontas, especially a man named John Rolfe. Pocahontas wanted to marry him. Powhatan made peace with the settlers to celebrate his daughter's marriage. It was the best wedding present Pocahontas could ever have. Pocahontas and her husband had a baby named Thomas. They all sailed across the ocean to visit England. So again, they're still living on the land where the Indians were, but they kind of made her a pilgrim. So she married a pilgrim man. There she is, and that's her new husband. Okay, and so here is her father and some other Indians that are at the wedding, and then here are some pilgrims at the wedding. So they kind of all got along in order for this wedding to happen. Okay, so they made peace for that little time. So then, after they had a baby, they wanted to travel on that boat back overseas, back to where the pilgrims came from, so that maybe she could meet his family and kind of show off their baby. It's a long ride over there, okay? What do you think of England? John Rolfe asked his wife. His wife is Pocahontas. There are so many people, Pocahontas replied. The people stared at Pocahontas. They had never seen an Indian before. She remembered how she had stared at them when they first were the settlers. So she just smiled. King James and Queen Anne thought Pocahontas was charming. She met the king and queen while she was over there. That's a pretty big deal, okay? So they trusted this Indian enough for her to meet the king and queen. Pocahontas had been in England for several months, and she became ill. One day she had a surprise visitor. It was Captain Smith. "You're alive!" gasped Pocahontas. "Alive and well," Smith replied. "You must get well too." But sadly, Pocahontas did not get better. She was only 21 years old when she died. Pocahontas helped to bring peace and friendship between the settlers and the Indians in America. So there she is. She's not doing well, but she had a visitor. Remember, she thought that he had died? Well, he didn't. And he heard she was there, so he came to visit her. Okay. Those two were really important in helping a friendship develop between the settlers or the pilgrims and the Indians. Okay. So it was kind of like, you know, a special surprise when she got to see him. So one thing I want to explain to you guys. So the Indians lived in America, way over here. Okay. And the pilgrims lived way over here in Europe. And they took a boat and they sailed across the ocean. Well, the problem is they weren't on the boat for like a day or two. They were on the boat for a long time. Long time. And on the boat, a lot of people got sick. Okay. Many of the pilgrims died trying to make it to America. Then, when the pilgrims got to America, they didn't have any houses. They didn't have anything. Winter came. They were cold. And they got sick while they were over there because they caught a cold. And so a lot more of them died. Many of them passed away. Okay. Well, another thing that happened is when the pilgrims came over to where the Indians were, and remember the Indians lived over here by themselves, they brought some type of sickness with them. And when they met with the Indians and got to know the Indians, they kind of gave the Indians some of their sickness too. So they were kind of passing back and forth different types of sicknesses. And so a lot of pilgrims and Indians died during that winter time, okay? We'll talk more about that, and we'll talk more about, you know, ways to celebrate the Pilgrims and the Indians, or the Native Americans as we call them. I have a lot more stories for you, so tune in tomorrow and I'll have a new story for you. But as you watch this video, I asked you a question about Pocahontas and whether she should be made into a pilgrim or she should be allowed to stay an Indian. I want you guys to go on your Canvas page. And over on the side, there's a button that says inbox. It's just like over on the side, there are several little white things that you can click on. And you're going to click on that one. It says inbox. And then up at the top where it says to, you can type in Mrs. Schaefer's name and you can send an email to me. And I want you to tell me if you think, yes, Pocahontas married a pilgrim, so she should be a pilgrim, or no, Pocahontas should still be allowed to be an Indian no matter what or no matter who she married. Okay? I want you to email me the answer of what you think. It's called your opinion. I want to know your opinion, what you think, okay? All right. Last thing I have for you is for our language lesson today. And we are talking about commas today, okay? So I have a little paper here that we're going to go through. And remember, apostrophes are up in the air and commas are down on the ground. They look very much the same, except they are not in the same spot. Apostrophes kind of float up in the air and they are used to show possessive or they're used to show contractions. Commas are down on the ground and they're used to separate things, okay? So if we look at this paper here, the first sentence says, I saw a shell, a fish, and a crab at the beach, okay? Well, if you notice, Mrs. Schaefer read this. I'm going to do it one more time. I saw a shell, a fish, and a crab at the beach. What did I do after the word shell, fish, and crab? You'll notice when I read it, I sort of paused. I saw a shell, a fish, and a crab at the beach. There was a little pause in between them. The reason there's a little pause is because normally that's where a comma would be. A comma lets us pause. Listen to me read it without commas, without pauses. I saw a shell, a fish, and a crab at the beach. I kind of ran all together. That sounded a little bit crazy. Okay? So what we're going to do, we're going to talk about where we should be putting commas in these sentences. Okay? Commas just allow us to kind of pause as we read. And they separate the things we're talking about so they all don't run together. I saw a shell. That's the first thing I saw. So I'm going to put a comma after shell. I saw a shell, comma. A fish, comma, and a crab at the beach. So now when I see one of those green commas, I will pause. I saw a shell, a fish, and a crab at the beach. Okay? So when I separate those three things, let's go to the next sentence. Macy likes popcorn, pretzels, and soda. Notice where my pause is when I read it. Listen to me again. Macy likes popcorn, pretzels, and soda. Notice I paused after Macy likes popcorn. That's where a comma would go because that's a pause. Pretzels and soda. Three things she likes: popcorn, pretzels, soda. So I have to put commas between them. I don't put a comma after soda because that's the last thing. I don't put a comma after crab because that's the last thing. Okay? There are more words in the sentence, but that's the last thing that I'm trying to separate, okay? Next sentence, AJ did math, reading, and spelling homework. Okay. Well, I'm seeing AJ do three things here. Listen to the pause. AJ did math, reading, and spelling homework. AJ did math, there was my first pause, reading, and spelling homework. So I put a comma between each one of those three things, math, reading, and spelling. Henry watched TV, read a book, and drew a picture. Three things Henry did. Let's put a pause. Henry watched TV, read a book, and drew a picture. Henry watched TV, read a book, and drew a picture. Sophia called Sienna, Lena, and Cameron. Listen for the pause. Sophia called Sienna, Lena, and Cameron. Sophia called Sienna, Lena, and Cameron. Okay? So basically, when you have three things, you're going to have a comma between the first two. This one, this one. So the comma separates shell and fish, and the comma separates fish and crab. Okay? The comma separates popcorn and pretzels, and the comma separates pretzels and soda. The comma separates math and reading, and the comma separates reading and spelling. The comma separates TV, watch TV, and read a book, and the comma right here separates read a book and drew a picture. The comma here separates Sienna and Lena, and this comma separates Lena and Cameron. Okay? So commas are important. They kind of allow us to take a little break when we read so it all doesn't run together and sound a little crazy. So for your assignment, you have a comma worksheet. Looks like this. Got a puppy on one side, got lots of pets on the other. Okay, and you're adding commas in there. Okay, think about where you might hear a pause. Think about how many things you're separating, okay? All right, remember your question, email me, and I'll see you tomorrow.